Well, good evening and welcome to the live stream event for the 2nd of June 2020. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Great to have you all on board, and we have a really packed show here tonight, so it will be very interesting to see how far through the content we get. We've already got quite a few on the stream, which is terrific, and a few names that I remember from early on when I just had a few hundred followers. Great to see you back on, as well as those more recently, and some new people too. So it's great to have you all here. And let's get on with the show. So what I'm going to do is, go across to here and just take you through some initial slides. Hope you like the new introduction. Decided I'd refresh the 30-minute pre-roll, as it were, and include some footage from the various cities across Australia. So just today we're going to quickly run through this introduction, the house rules about my models, some key slides, and then the questions and answers, and we'll sign off. This probably will go for about an hour and a half, might go for slightly longer, depends a bit how the conversation goes. I have hundreds and hundreds of requests for postcodes, so it could go on for a bit longer even. In terms of house rules, as normal, I have to say, not financial advice, my own analysis, my own research only. If you need financial advice, go talk to a financial advisor and get specific tailored advice. I can't give that here. Please play nice in the chat room. No racial slurs. Plexus is doing a great job of moderating. Once again, I appreciate that, Plexus. It really makes a big difference. Plenty of conversations. I encourage conversations on the stream, but we don't need any racial stuff. This is out at the 2nd of June. Of course, if you're watching this later, it might have been completely different, but this is my stake in the ground based on the latest data. And if you want to get my attention, please do use Walk the World. There are lots of different conversations going on the live stream, and it's very often the case that I don't see all of the conversations, so to make quite sure that I do, use Walk the World. I have enabled Super Chat, and people have already started to use that, so that's terrific. Thank you. And as well as making sure that your question is seen, you can also make a contribution to help DFA cover the costs. We don't make any profit out of what we do. This is all about just informing people, and there are running costs involved in making the shows and putting them out. So any support is greatly appreciated. Now, just a quick shout out to Cookie Boy, and we got over 1,300 concurrent views when Edward last week, despite the poor audio, and Cookie committed to $200 as a result of that, but he's actually said if we get more than 1,000 tonight, he's going to double it. So if you don't see people on the stream that are normally on the stream, go and hurry them along and see whether you can get them to come on too. It'd be great to try and get more than 1,000 again. This is great for the stream, but also Cookie, really appreciate your contribution, and of course great for the charities as well, so thank you for that. Now, in terms of our core market model, there may be some who don't understand how we do what we do, and I'll just, as I always do, just quickly explain it. So we survey households and small businesses on a rolling weekly basis. And in fact, the latest data came in today. So what we're going to talk about in a few moments is data as fresh as basically 24 hours ago. So this is bang up to date. And then we put that information into our model with a lot of other information from public sources like the Reserve Bank and APRA and those things, as well as private sources. And we produce material that goes to our clients, that goes to the blog and the YouTube channel, and also drives all our analysis, including mortgage stress. And we can slice and dice this information in lots of different ways. So think of it like a Rubik's Cube. And the critical thing about that is that we need to understand that averages don't tell you anything at all. So, average house price movements, average house prices themselves don't really tell you much. You have to get granular. You have to understand the different types of things that are going on. So that's pretty important. Now, in terms of the RBA statement today, it wasn't a huge amount of new stuff, but it's quite interesting. Basically, they said economy is going through a difficult period. It's the biggest economic contraction since the 1930s. Total hours worked declined by an unprecedented 9%, and more than 600,000 people lost their jobs, with many more people working 0 hours. Of course, the true unemployment rate's probably around 15%, despite the fact that it was reported at 6.2%. Household spending weakened very considerably, and investment plans are being deferred or cancelled. So that is, in a nutshell, how the Reserve Bank sees it. I think they're pretty accurate in terms of that assessment. Then they said, notwithstanding those developments, it's possible the depth of the downturn will be less than earlier expected, because the rate of new infections declined significantly and some restrictions have been eased earlier than perhaps expected. And there are some pickups in some forms of consumer spending. So from a very low base, a little bit of an improvement. I think that probably pretty much reflects what I'm seeing in my data, as I'll show you shortly. However, the outlook, including the speed of recovery, remains highly uncertain, and it's likely that the pandemic will have long-lasting effects on the economy. In the period immediately ahead, much will depend on the confidence that people and businesses have about the health situation and their own finances. And I think that's right. A lot of it's confidence-led, but also confidence is triggered to things like employment or unemployment. And they say that the substantial, coordinated and unprecedented easing of fiscal and monetary policy is helping the economy in this difficult period, and it's going to be required for some time to come. That's certainly true. And of course, Phil Lowe keeps saying fiscal, fiscal, fiscal. In other words, he's running out of runway with regard to interest rates. And the board will not increase the cash rate until progress has been made towards full employment and inflation is sustainably within 2 to 3%. Now, when are we going to see that? Very, very good question. Bearing in mind that they failed miserably on their target for a good number of years, and bearing in mind that employment was at 5.2% before the crisis, when they were looking at 4.5%. So it's highly unlikely, in my view, they're going to meet their targets. Now, one interesting question is what's going to happen with GDP tomorrow? And there's a lot of contradictory evidence around. We know that household consumption has fallen. This is from CBA. We know that there's been a fall in residential construction. We know there's been a fall in business investment. We know that the government has been throwing money in left, right and centre, and so the so-called public demand number will be higher. And we also know that people have been running down their inventories, so businesses and firms running down their inventories. So that's going to reduce the growth level. And the terms of trade which came out today was net positive of more than 8 billion over the month, which was amazing. And pretty much that was all to do with exports of iron ore and similar products, plus the fact that imports were very low as well. And what they're suggesting is probably a 0.3 minus, in other words, minus 0.3% quarterly CPI, though some are saying slightly more, some are saying slightly less. It could be zero. It's unlikely to be positive. But their main point is the negative GDP print will mean Australia's long recession-free run came to an end in 2020. They don't place much weight on the technical definition of a recession, which is, of course, defined as 2 quarters of GDP contraction. But they say, and I agree with them, it's crystal clear that the Australian economy is in a recession, even if Q1 GDP remains just slightly positive. So, you can argue about a margin at the margin, but we know where the economy is sitting. Now, in terms of Roy Morgan, they actually reported their confidence levels up again. So it was up another 5.6 points to 98.3, which is now 24% higher. Than is now higher than it was, but it's still well down from the long-term average, and we're still in effectively global financial crisis territory. So things have recovered a bit, but not much. Now 24% say families say they are feeling better off financially than this time last year. 36 unchanged say their families are worse off financially, and 38% are unchanged. So there's a mix of opinion out there, which I was probably thinking about. And they're also basically saying that longer term, 24%, which is up 4% of Australians are expecting good times for the Australian economy over the next 5 years, compared to 17%, which is down 3 points, expecting bad times. Now 42%, up 7 points, of Australians say now is a good time to buy major household items, while 34%, which is down 4 points, say now is a bad time to buy. So look, we're very split as a country, as an economy, and I think it depends on whether you've been hit directly or indirectly by the COVID and everything else. Some have, some haven't, but more than half of households are still very much feeling it, in my view. And I'll be reporting my Household Financial Confidence Index shortly. When I say shortly, not on tonight's stream, but in 2 or 3 days. I'm still running that model. Now, in terms of mortgage and rental stress, I want to focus here tonight because there's a really important story to tell about mortgage stress and rental stress. And, sometimes we skip over it and then go on to other things. So tonight, I'm definitely going to be focusing on it. And it's worth saying, when we talk about mortgage stress, I'm defining this in cash flow terms. Now, there are various ways of talking about mortgage stress. So, for example, a lot of people say if you're paying more than 30% of your income, then they're clear whether it's gross or net income, 30% of income on your mortgage, then you're in stress or more. Now, I don't think that tells you very much. So I look at it in cash flow terms. So I'm looking at money in, money out. And that tells me that I can look at, for example, when on my surveys, I understand gross income, and that's from salaries and pensions and interest and dividend and all other sources. That allows me to look at one side of the ledger. And then we also get information on money out, things like what tax, mortgage repayments, rents, other housing costs, food, childcare, school fees, all the other things. And so what I create for each of my households in the surveys is a mini cash flow for a household. And I think that's a really powerful way of trying to understand what's going on. So that's how I do it. And then, it's possible they may have assets or investments, but if in cash flow terms they are close to zero or slightly negative, then households are flagged as in stress. And if they are 10% below or more in terms of cash flow deficit, then they're in severe stress. And we use those definitions then to flag each household. And then we can run our analyses to aggregate it up from an individual household level to postcodes, to regions, to states, or a national average. That's how we do it. And we run that model every time, and that gives us a stake in the ground. So it's a cash flow based view. And I should say that I've taken into account all of the various factors. So I've taken into account job seeker, job keeper. I've taken into account the mortgage repayment holidays where those have existed, and all the other factors that actually flex the cash flows, including things like free childcare. So that's all helped. And so we're trying to put a stake in the ground. Now, obviously, we don't survey all of our households every time. We have 52,000 in the model, 1,000 a week. So what we're now doing is we're taking the most recent survey samples and then extrapolating back from those across the rest of the sample to essentially say if other households were in these same categories, then they behave in the same way. That's how we do it. So to give us a rolling 52,000 sample. And in terms of mitigation, so people are going to cut back on spending, draw down on deposits, put more on credit cards, or maybe even go for other forms of credit like payday loans. Unfortunately, I'm doing a piece of work at the moment for a particular client looking at payday loans. They're rising quite fast, unfortunately. That's a really bad sign because, of course, people pay a very high rate of interest, or they don't know they're paying interest, but they are effectively for those types of loans. And the research that we've done, and I've been following this since 2002, suggests that stress actually ultimately can lead to forced sale or default, but not immediately. So households sometimes get out of it if it's a temporary situation, illness or something like that. But if it's something more structural, then over 2 to 3 years, they tend to get themselves into a sort of a downward spiral. They might try to refinance a couple of times. They might try and do other things. They might try to rebalance their finances, move to another lender, all those sorts of things, consolidate loans. But eventually, it comes home to roost. And if you want a case study, look at Mandurah over in Western Australia. I looked at Mandurah 3 or 4 years ago, and in fact, it was the subject of the report that we did on Four Corners about 2 years ago with Michael Brissenden. And I suggested he go over to Mandurah and just have a look at what's happening there. At the time, mortgage stress was rising reasonably fast over there. And subsequently, since then, we've seen high levels of default, negative equity, prices have dropped further. And the whole social fabric of that particular part of the country, I think, is under severe pressure. And in fact, I did a show last year with John Adams and Robbie Barwick, and they drove around and showed the number of properties that were for sale last year. So, unfortunately, my concern is that what we saw in Mandurah 2, 3, 4 years ago, we're starting to see in other places too. And so this essentially is an early warning sign, in my view, of what we could expect ahead unless things change substantially. So here is the latest mortgage stress data. Last time we did it, which was a month ago, it was above 38%. Big jump up. Used to be 32.9% in February before the COVID. went up to 38. It came back slightly, so 37.5%, but that's still more than 1.4 million households, borrowing households, who are impacted. And that's taking account of JobKeeper, some returning workers, so some people are getting back to work now, working, maybe not as many hours, but some hours. We've taken account of payment postponements from the banks, for example, mortgages, and also other things like credit cards, and also things like refinancing, and even the switch to interest only. So there's quite a few people now being encouraged to switch their mortgage repayments to interest only, which is completely nuts if you think about it. 2 years ago, all the regulators were worried about interest only loans because the problem with interest only loans, you're not repaying capital, so you've still got to pay the capital later. So switching back to interest only is just kicking the can down the road. So I'm worried by that. But anyway, so at the moment, my modelling is now suggesting that if things continue to run the way that I expect them to run, we're going to see mortgage stress up at around 40% in August. And then, of course, the question is what happens in September, October, November. So that's going to be important. Now, just in terms of some quick run-throughs, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of the states first at a high level, and then I'm going to go into the states in a bit more detail. And then after that, I'm going to start looking at individual postcodes and then start answering your questions. I'm not really looking at the chat at the moment, so if you put stuff in there, I'll come back and read it later, but I'm just going through this at the moment. So Tasmania leads the states in percentage terms. So if you see here, Tasmania has around 45-46% of households in mortgage stress. That's the highest. In terms of percentage, although not in numbers. You can see that Victoria and New South Wales have very similar levels in terms of 400,000 or thereabouts, and you can see that there are slightly more in Victoria, sitting at around 40% compared with New South Wales, which is sitting at around 35-36%. The ACT has the lowest proportion of people in mortgage stress, perhaps not surprisingly, given the public sector there. So that's the state of play. And the other thing to highlight is the risk of default. So you can see that WA default is double what it is in the other states because they've had house prices running down for quite a long time. They've had very anemic income growth, if any income growth, and unemployment has been quite high. And it's worth just reflecting on that. The Western Australian economy was going backwards before COVID. And that tells you that in the environment that we had in Australia with higher unemployment, it was already going negative. So in a way, we might expect to see WA as given an example of what's going to happen more broadly. Young growing families by segment are the most stressed. So if you look at that young growing family, so these are first-time buyers, these are people with young kids, around 70%, just around 70% of young growing families are actually in stress. Now, of course, some of that's typical because many households will actually, commit themselves when they go buy a house on the understanding that incomes will grow later. The trouble is incomes haven't grown for a good number of years, so many people are caught. And you can see the other segments there. Some of the more affluent ones are also on the list of exclusive professionals, wealthy seniors, and even some of the people that you would not normally expect to be in the middle of this problem. So this is an example of what we're seeing. Now, if we then look at the region, so this is effectively now just coming up from a postcode level to a regional view, you can see that Sydney, Melbourne has the largest count overall, followed by Sydney. So that's the geographic region that we've called Sydney. Then we go to Brisbane and Adelaide, and then we go across to Western Australia, the Hunter region, back to Western Australia, then the Central Coast. We can go down the list, but the point here is that mortgage stress is not something that's just hitting the major centres. It's not just a city problem. It's actually hitting all parts of the country. And whilst the home prices will be lower in some of the regional areas, the incomes are lower, and the differential movement is also creating a lot of pain. So, and incidentally, we're also seeing a lot of people out from the main centres being significantly hit by COVID, particularly around the tourism didn't happen. And some of them are also, of course, recalling from the bushfires previously too. And then if we just go to the next slide, this is the national postcode, the most stressed. And so Ballarat 3350 has now got the prize for the most stressed postcode. That's a change from last time. And then we've got another Victorian postcode 3037, which is sort of Hillside, Sydenham, that area there. And then we go to Western Australia with Clarkson, Tamula Park on 6030. And then we go back to Victoria to Point Cook and Werribee on 3030. And then we go to Hoppers Crossing, 3029. And then we go to New South Wales postcode 2567, which includes Mount Annan and Harrington Park. And then we go to Pakenham, 3810, Cranbourne, 3977. And then we go to Tasmania with Launceston, 3250. And then we go to 4034 up in Queensland and 2800, 6069 and 5108. So that's down towards Salisbury in SA. So there you go. That's the top postcodes. And you can see there that of all those, the default rate is highest in Cranbourne. You can see that's the little blue bar. So we try to make an estimate of the defaults that are going to happen over the next 12 months. And in fact, in my model, down to a postcode level, I've now incorporated risk of default. So when I start showing that data, you'll be able to see the defaults. Now, let's go to WA first. I had a message yesterday saying, please show us the state by state by state distribution rather than just the national. So this is the WA ones, and you can see there that Clarkson, 6030, Curtin is the region that it's in, and then 6069 Stirling, that's Aveley, Bellis, Brigadoon, and then another one in Stirling, 6018 Churchlands, Doubleview, and then 6164 in Brand, which is Atwell, Auburn Grove, Banjup, and a bunch of others that just run on. I just can't put them all on the chart. So there you go. You can see that, in fact, a lot of them are sitting in Brand, Stirling, but other places too. So other thing to note here is that there are it's quite a tail off. So there's some which are very, very high, and there are others which are somewhat lower. And, it's worth just highlighting in a bit more detail here that the percentage does vary quite considerably. So you can see there that in some cases the percentage is well above 50% of households in a particular postcode in Western Australia. Now here is a map, and you won't be able to see too much because it's rather high scale, but I just wanted to highlight that down the bottom there is Mandurah. So the colour coding is that the reddy colours are actually the highest stress level. So that's more than 88% of households in Mandurah. And you can see there that there are some other ones up north, some over also to the west. And then as you come down into Perth, you can see that different areas have different shades. Rockingham area, some areas around Rockingham's not doing so well. Some of the areas closer into Perth are doing somewhat better. And the blue ones are below 7%. So they're the areas there's a least stress. So the point to make is, and I'll show you all the maps for all the different areas of the country, that it does vary considerably by individual location. Now, if we go to South Australia, we can see there that Adelaide, 5108, which is places like Paralowie, is actually the most stressed, more than 5,000. And then we've got 5162, which is like Morphett, places like that. Again, in the Adelaide city suburbs region. And then we've got 5114, and then we've got 5118, and so it goes on. So you can see that South Australia is also under the gun here, and note that the average here is quite high. So there are lots of households in South Australia now registering as significantly stressed. And I can show this also on the same mapping. So this is Adelaide, and you can see, unfortunately, some of the red areas are actually quite close in to the city as well as further out. And again, it does vary where you look. There are some doing better, some doing less well. And the thing about this sort of analysis is it shows you where the hotspots are. And these, of course, are potentially where, if there are a lot of stressed households in a particular postcode, it may well be that they decide to sell up or move on or whatever. So it perhaps should tell you something about house prices too. Let's go to New South Wales next. So this is the New South Wales story. So we start with Harrington Park and Currants Hill, that's 2567. And then we go to area around 2800 up in the central tablelands, and then we go to 2770, so Bidwell, Blackett, places like that, and then we go up into the Hunter at 2287, and then we go to Glenwood and Park Lee on 2769, and then we go to 2176 like Abbotsbury, Bosley Park. Now you can see again the sort of same trend, some significantly peaky areas in terms of proportions. And it's interesting debate, of course, whether I should be showing the total number of households or the percentage. The percentage is probably the better indicator, but I do prefer to show the total number of households that are exposed because it actually gives you a bit of a weight. And here is the New South Wales picture, so you can see that the Hills Shire and Blacktown in particular have a significant issue, a couple up over there as well, up towards the Blue Mountains. And you can see as you come over to the east, the colours do definitely pale more towards the yellow and blue. So you could argue that the stress problem is greater. Look at Campbelltown compared with some of the other areas. You can actually see that there's some quite interesting differentiation. Some of the lower North Shore is better, like Hornsby. That's pretty good at the moment. But it does vary. And down towards Wollongong, not looking so good either. Queensland. So we start with 4034, like Apsley, places like that. Then we go to Camp Hill at 4152. And then we go to Augustine, which is 4300. And then Basin Pocket, which is 4305. So you can begin to see some of those there. And again, we have the same issue. So again, it's not uniform. Some areas are good, some areas are less good. And if we look at the map, you can see there that we've got Ipswich over there, big area. We've got Logan and the area around there. Down towards the Gold Coast, there are some issues. And then we've got some issues up towards Moreton Bay as well. Now, closer into the city of Brisbane, it's not so bad. There are some areas of blue, but there are also some areas of shade too. So again, it makes the point. You've got to go granular because not all postcodes are behaving the same way, even at the same location. Queensland, Brisbane, now Victoria. Ballarat, top of the list. So Ballarat, 3350, more than 7,000, unfortunately. Then we go to Delaney, Hillside at 3037, and Derrimut, Point Cook, 3030, Hoops Crossing, 3029, Pakenham, 3810, Cannons Creek, 3977, and I won't go across the whole list. You can perhaps see them there. By the way, all of these charts will be available on the DFA blog once I've finished this presentation and once I've made a few more changes to them. So they will be available, and you can then go click on it and look in more detail if you want to do that. But again, here is the Victorian map, and you can see some red around the Ballarat area, some red also out towards the east, towards Dandenong and beyond. And what typifies a lot of these places is that they're actually often quite new areas, high development, a lot of big properties on small blocks, often with not a lot of infrastructure around it, and quite often thousands and thousands and thousands of very similar properties. And in fact, the growth corridor in Melbourne is a lot of it's around here towards Dandenong and beyond, as well as around towards Derrimut, and of course at some of the regional areas too. So that gives you a flavour there. Tasmania. Tasmania's a bit of a worry to me because there's lots of early warning signs in Tassie. The worst is East Launceston, 7250, and you can see nearly 6,000 there. That's pretty high. And then you go to Belvery in South Tasmania at 7018, and then Austin's Ferry and the areas around there, 7011. Then Black Hills and Boyer, 7140. Carlton, Connellsville, 7173. On it goes. So you can see then that there's quite a spread. And here is the situation with regard to Hobart. You can see there north and east, the red areas. Hobart itself is looking a little easier, but unfortunately there are some significant pressure points. I haven't done the northern part of Tasmania on this particular chart. And then the ACT last set here, you can see that there are still some issues. Not as many issues in the ACT. It's been an area where there's been a lot of public sector jobs, and unemployment's been quite low and wages have been quite high. But nevertheless, we're seeing some growth. So 2914, Amaru, Bonner, Ford, 2913, Nungawel, Nicholas, and 2902, Canberra, and then 2615, places like Spence, Charnwood, and then down towards the south coast like Brindabella, that area as well, 2611. And some of those are also being impacted by the bushfires, I should add as well. And that gives you the sense of what's happening in the ACT. So again, some difference of colour, but there's no real dark red. There's some areas where there's more difficulty there. So I hope that's given you a bit of a flavour of the differences between different locations and different types of geographies and different types of postcodes. Now, just on rental stress briefly, the rental stress story is somewhat similar. So there's 1.75 million households in rental stress. And remember that more than 1/3 of all households, so we've got nearly 10 million households in Australia, more than 1/3 of them rent. Again, we've got the highest proportion in percentage terms, at more than 50% in Tasmania, but we've then got New South Wales with the biggest count. And you can see there that the stress levels vary between 50 and 30%. We also cut it by segment, so you can see there young growing families, not surprisingly perhaps. So there's some mirroring of the financial profiles between mortgage holders and those who are renting, interestingly. And I find this quite fascinating because we find similar families, some renting, some with property, but both with similar characteristics and both with financial pressures. And here are the top postcodes. I won't go into this in a lot of detail because it will take too long, but just to say that 3000, which is Melbourne, is actually the postcode with the highest count of people in rental stress across Australia. And that's not surprising given the very high volume of high-rise that's been built there, a lot of students, a lot of people living close in. And then we go to 2560, which is places like Aids and Appin, quite a few different places there. And then 2540, and then 2250 and 2170, like Chipping Norton, places like that. Now, interestingly, 2170 is also a highly stressed postcode as well. So there's a correlation in some cases between the two, but not always. And I'll just highlight that places like Bondi are on the list there. Places like Surrey Hill and Darlinghurst, I should say, 2010 are there. And then we go to places like Hooper's Crossing, which you heard from mortgage stress at 3029. So there's a correlation for some areas between the two, but there are also some postcodes that are unique from a rental stress perspective. We don't see a lot of mortgage stress, but we do see high rental stress. So I'm afraid this is all telling a pretty unsavoury story about the pressures on households. Now, just in terms of the scenarios, before I come to the detailed analysis of postcodes, we've run up our scenarios again. So again, I've run this model today, and as you know, we drive the scenarios off our core market model. The truth of the matter is that our scenarios are just ways of exploring the future. We don't put a stake in the ground and say it's definitely going to be like this. We say, here's a range of different scenarios and here are some different things that could happen. And so our baseline view, this is if the RBA is right and if in fact we get the fiscal stimulus and everything else. I think there is a path over the next 2 years, and I'm baselining it from May, for prices to go up maybe as much as 10% on average, some higher, some lower. And I've increased my probability from 5% to 10%. And that's because of the assumption that the government's going to throw the kitchen sink at the property sector, as we've seen, all the announcements of what's going to happen. And that's going to put something of a floor on. And I'm also assuming that migration will probably start to reinitialise, not immediately, but later. So that's why that's the most positive view. And there are people out there spruiking that view and saying that's going to be the future. So I'm saying, 10% chance, I think. The next one is my best case scenario, which is looking for a fall of prices between 5 and 15%. And there, I give that a 20% weighting. It's interesting that Shane Oliver came out today and said he's changed his view from 20% drop to maybe 10% drop. So he's sort of in that same ballpark now. There are various sort of people saying various things about the different views as to what may happen. So it's quite interesting. But that's that second scenario. That's got a 20% chance. It was a 7.5% chance last month. So you can see that there's been a shift. And it's partly because we're not quite in such deep doo-doo as perhaps people thought. And it's partly because there's more signalling coming from the government that they're going to do stuff. And of course, they got the 60 billion that they never spent for the JobKeeper. Now, the longer-term crunch scenario, which is the one that I still think is quite likely to play out, is now at 40% weighting. And this is where we actually get a further reduction in rates. The chances are that rates will go close to zero or to zero. The Reserve Bank has said not negative. Westpac came out today and said, well, you know, negative rates probably at some point should be considered. And my view is wholesale negative rates possibly, retail negative rates highly unlikely for the next year or two. Beyond that, who knows? 40% rating, so that's still quite probable, but at that point you've got mortgage rates at 42% and you've got prices down between 15 and 30%. And I should say that this is based on where we were back in May, so this is movements from this point. Global disruption, so if this thing goes on and doesn't die down as people hope, and if the social distancing basically unwinds, that could get worse. 20% weighting on a 30 to 45% fall. And I'm now getting towards Harry Dent territory, of course, in that scenario. And then the last one is the uncontrolled pandemic. So let's assume that this gets really bad again and the global shutdowns start up again. That will be sufficient to take us into a very significant correction. I only give that now a 10% weighting, so I've basically shaded it down from 15. So you can see that overall my analysis is shifting slightly more positive, although I could see a path towards positive home prices at about 10%. The most likely scenarios are somewhere around the 5 to 15 or 15 to 30% on average. And, depends. Units, houses will do different things, different locations will do different things, but this is a national average. So that's my scenarios. Okay, so let's now go back to the Q&A. And what I want to do for this is I just want to introduce you to my model, and then I'll explain what we're going to do and how we're going to use the model to answer some of the questions that I know are there. So let me just go back to that one. Right. So this is the core market model. This is now my live database, and I've got pretty much every postcode in the country loaded in. And I'm reporting for each location the long list of names in that location, the characteristic, so I put them in different regions, so like CBD or urban fringe or whatever, the state they're in, the postcode they're in, the major household segment that tends to reside in that particular postcode. It doesn't mean everybody's in that segment, but it's if you like, the prevailing segment. And then we have the number of households who are in that segment, my estimate of it, the number who are borrowing for mortgage purposes. They might have credit cards and other things, but I'm talking here mortgages. The number who are renting, and then what the number is in mild stress and in severe stress, and the percentage in mortgage stress, and then I've got an estimate of the risk of defaults over the next 12 months. So this is basically assuming my scenarios play out as I expect. What would the defaults look like? So that gives us a bit of information and a percentage. So what the percentage could be if that actually played out. And then we also look at rental stress, which is what proportion of people renting have financial flow issues. And then the last one is overall financial stress. So that financial stress is an aggregate measure of both rental stress and mortgage stress. And the thing to understand is the higher those percentage numbers, the more risk there is in that particular postcode. That then puts negative pressure on property prices. So in other words, the more financial stress, the more rental stress, the more mortgage stress in a postcode, the greater the probability that home prices will move down rather than up. Okay. So let me go up to the top. I've got thousands and thousands of requests, and I've also got stuff beforehand as well. So let's see what I can go to. Live chat. Okay. Let's have a look. Okay, I think I might have dropped a few. Hoppers Crossing, not Hoopers Crossing. Sorry. Dear. I think I've said that a few times, unfortunately. It's one of those tricky ones. I may have missed a few early ones because what happens is with the chats, I hadn't realised that early ones disappear, which is a bit annoying. Anyway, Wiley Park, 2195 says Ivan. Okay, let's have a look at Wiley Park. Edit the filter. Okay, so we'll get rid of that and then we'll put in 2195, add that in there, apply. Okay, so Wiley Park, 2195, outer suburbs of New South Wales, includes Lakemba as well, and there are around 8.9 thousand households, 2,100 borrowing, a lot renting, 5,800 renting, not many in mild stress or severe stress, and in fact the proportion who are in mortgage stress is below the national average at 27.2%. Risk of default is pretty low at 37. Risk of default 12 months 1.7%. But this is the interesting thing, rental stress is very high, 57%. That's higher than the national average. And interestingly, financial stress is also quite high. So it looks to me as though we are going to see significant issues there. And by way of flagging the segment, the multicultural establishment segment is the predominant segment there in terms of the household segment. So there you go. That's Wiley Park. And on that basis, my view would be that the rental side is going to continue to be very weak. We know that there are some investment properties there. Some of those will probably struggle. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see more investment properties for sale ahead. But I also note that the mortgage stress at the moment is not too severe, so the default rates will be quite low. Okay, let's go. What's the next one we've got? Just going down the list. Clyde, North Victoria. This is for NK's Brick World. 3978. Okay, into the filter. Get rid of it. Oops. 3978. Go for that. Apply. Okay. Okay, Clyde. Yes. All right. So this includes Cardinia, Clyde and Clyde North, regional Victoria. Wealthy seniors is the predominant segment. It's a relatively smaller community with 3,800 households, 2,719 borrowing, 1,398 in mortgage stress. Renting. Mortgage stress pretty low, 236. Which is 8.7%, so that's really very low. Risk of default, pretty low at 97. Default next 12 months, though, 3.6%. And that's because of the proportion who are borrowing. So that's a bit higher than some others, but not the highest. Proportion rental stress is quite high. The overall financial stress is 30. So that looks like a more stable suburb. And there aren't any massive indications there of significant issues other than this rental stress one, which is, I think, an interesting one. The chances are that the renting proportion's quite low relative, but I also noticed that quite a few are borrowing. But most of the people who are borrowing are doing very well at the moment. So the financial pressures for many people with a mortgage in that area is a little less low. So my view is that prices are more likely to be a little more stable there, I think. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, Reservoir 3073, and that is for Matthew. 3073. Apply. Okay, so this is Reservoir Victoria, outer suburbs. It's classified in my segmentation as a battling urban area. It's got a very large count, 21,846 households, 6,500 are borrowing, 10,000 are renting. That's a very high rental. That's more than, close to half, or more than half perhaps. Mild stress, 3,136, and that equates to 47.8% in mortgage stress. So that's above the national average. Default rates are a bit higher. Default over the next 12 months, 1.9%. That's because it's a big base, of course. Rental stress, 37. Financial stress, 32. So the thing I'm worried about there is the mortgages. We're seeing this quite a lot in some of the outer suburbs, and this may well be a new area. I don't know it, but it looks to me as though it could well be a new area or area with some new developments. And this is quite typical what we see. We see quite a few people borrowing, quite a few of those people borrowing now with significant pressures. And the chances are that we're going to see prices slide further in these sorts of areas simply because of the supply-demand disequilibrium. And remember that the renting sector is doing not well at the moment because rents are actually sliding down, and probably investors aren't doing so well. So I think there will be sell pressure ahead, and I'd keep an eye on the overall trajectory of mortgage stress. At 47.8%, that's pretty high. And certainly, if I go back to Mandurah 3 or 4 years ago, the mortgage stress was roughly in the same sort of ballpark. So you could perhaps read that in the next 2 or 3 years, unless something changes dramatically, we could possibly end up with a similar outcome. PZ, thank you for that. 2780 Lura. It's in the Blue Mountains, I think, isn't it? Let's have a look. Edit the filter. Soon find out. It gets a bit hypnotic, this, because it's just so interesting. I mean, I love looking at all of the data. 2780. And, the more you start looking at this, the more you can begin to... that worked, yeah. The more you can begin to sort of extrapolate from it. So, okay, rural, yeah. 2780 includes Katoomba, Lura, and Meadow Bath. And by the way, I should say I only go down to a postcode level for this analysis. We don't have granularity down in the location level in this particular lens that we use. So 7,472 households, of which 2,223 are borrowing, 3,717 are renting, 859 in mild mortgage stress, none in severe stress, 38% in mortgage stress, risk of default 34, so that's relatively low. Default next 12 months 1.5%, that's relatively low. Rental stress 22, financial stress 22.6. So a relatively benign environment relative to some of the others we've seen. And my view is there that there's probably some support for property prices over the next 12 to 18 months. Not dramatic support, but some support. It's unlikely we're going to see significant falls unless the economy goes into our scenario 4 or scenario 5. Michael asked, thank you for that, great show. In your scenarios, your most likely scenario was mortgage stress at 42%. What is it currently? It's at 37.5% at the moment, Michael. Can I please check out, this is from Rosie, 4556 Bundarim. Sure, easy. As long as I can use my system here. 4556 added in, apply, okay. Well, it's because I mistyped it. Oh dear. We'll try that one again. 4556. Unfortunately, when an idiot is driving the keyboard, you're going to get idiotic results. Okay. Bundarim, there you go. Regional Queensland. Suburban mainstream, that's categorisation. That includes Skippy Downs, Kunda Park, Tanawaha. Households, 17,499 households, of which 7,173 are currently borrowing and 7,000 are currently renting. There's 2,321 in mild mortgage stress, none in severe stress, Mortgage stress is at 32.4, so that's lower than the national average. Risk of default 185, that's not too bad, at 2.6%. And rental stress at 22% and financial stress at 22.1. So that looks a pretty stable environment there. And I would suggest on the basis of that prices are likely to remain relatively stable, might be slightly down. There's probably not enough momentum to hold prices higher, but I don't think you're going to see any sudden surges of significant sales in the short term to medium term, in my view, based on that data. Okay, done that one. Dillura. We have a belligerent renter, says Agent Smith 5214. I love it. Belligerent renter. I know, there are some of those around, aren't they? It's tricky. It is tricky if you get one of those. 5214. Apply. 5214. Whoops. Okay. Okay. Is that the right one? Hope it is. 5214. 5214. Currency Creek. Gulwa. It's inner regional Australia, South Australia. Wealthy seniors is the predominant categorisation. Households just over 6,000, just over borrowing 1,250. Renting 3,450. So it's definitely, quite a renty type of area, and the mortgage stress is pretty low, and the rental stress is also very low. So if you've got a belligerent one, you could probably get another tenant looking at that. And overall financial stress is pretty low. So that's a relatively benign environment there compared to some of the other ones we've seen. Joanna B, please check 3122 Hawthorne if you can. Sure. Thanks for your contribution as well. 3122. Oops. Three, 1, 2, 2. Apply. That first. Apply. Okay, there we go. Hawthorne. Okay. Inner suburbs, Victoria, mature or stable families is the predominant segment type. 11,578 households, 2,804 borrowing, 779 renting, 841 in mild stress, 795 in severe stress. So mortgage stress overall is 58.3. That's very high. So there's a lot of financial pressures in that particular postcode. Risk of default 99 over the next 12 months at 3.5%. So again, default rates higher than some others. And rental stress at 37.7% is around average. Overall financial stress a little bit average. So to my mind, what we're seeing here is a particular postcode where mortgage stress is probably more of an issue. And at that sort of 58%, I would be concerned about property prices in the next 2 to 3 years. It's likely they will slide, and I wouldn't be surprised to see some false sales over the next 12 to 18 months. Okay, Robert, 4810, Castle Hill in Queensland. Sure. $4810. Apply. Okay. All right. So this includes Castle Hill, North Ward, South Townsville, Town Common, Townsville, West End. Rural family, it's classified. Oh, that's a big area, so that's perhaps the reason. 12,177 households, 2,864 borrowing, 7,885 renting, so more renting than borrowing. Mild stress 1,284 at 44.8%. So it's higher than the average. 86 risking default over the next 12 months or 3%. And rental stress at 17.1, financial stress at 21.6. So renting not doing too badly. Mortgage stress more of a concern at 44%, but not as high as some of the others that we've seen. But nevertheless, there are some building pressures there. And the question, of course, is whether, in fact, those mortgage stress levels will continue to rise. The risk of default, I should just say, by the way, risk of default means people might default once and then be able to repay, or might go into more serious defaults, because once you default, sometimes you can recover, sometimes you can't recover. It doesn't mean there's going to be a forced sale every time. So there you go, that's that one. Can I look at 4220? This is from Puff Mummy. Okay, let's edit the filter, clear the list, and then put 4220, 4220. So I've got 2,500 postcodes in my database, so I don't think that we're going to cover all of them tonight, but we're going to cover a fair few at this rate. Burley Heads, Burley Waters, Miami. This is the young affluent segment. 14,791, of which 5,319 are borrowing, 6,745 are renting, 1,655 in mild stress, none in severe stress. So stress is at 31.1%. So that's below the national average, but still relatively high. 154 risk default over the next 12 months at 2.9%. Rental stress is relatively low at 7.9%, and financial stress at 14.8% is relatively low. So that looks like a relatively safe and secure postcode, although the stresses are a little bit higher than I'd like to see. But it doesn't look to me as though there are huge pressures there in terms of prices falling immediately. May change, but that's where it looks at the moment. Okay, what else have we got? Mickey says, 2305, please, Chief. Okay, easy. The filter. Clear that one. Two, 304. Which is, okay, Newcastle, Mayfield, around Sandgate, Warrabrook. So this is classified as a disadvantaged fringe segment. 6,931, 2,585 borrowing, 3,483 renting, 1,633 in mild stress, none in severe stress, but 63% in stress. 63% risking default in 12 months at 2.4%, rental stress at 10.3%, financial stress at 28.8%. So mortgage stress is a real issue here. At 63.2%, that's a signal to me of prices likely to slide over the next 12 to 18 months. Considerable number of people with financial flow issues. Maybe it'll bounce back if, in fact, the economy recovers. But I would be worried at that amount of stress. Interestingly, the rental stress doesn't seem to be mirroring the same. So that's an interesting one. Often they go in the same direction, but not always. So there you go. So yeah, that's concerning data with regard to mortgage stress. Okay, there you go. That was 4304, right? Yep, done that one. Jonathan says, can you look at 2525? Sure can. Close to home here. D5. I'm just up the road, or down the road, depending on how you look at it. Apply. Okay. Fig tree. Classified in regional New South Wales suburban mainstream, 4,353 households, of which 1,975 are borrowing, 1,135 renting, 624 in mortgage stress at 31.6, so a little bit below the national average. 32 risking default over the next 12 months at 1.6%, but the rental stress is quite high at 45.5, and overall financial stress score is 26.2. So here, it's more about those who are renting and being able to actually maintain those rental streams. So if I was a property investor in Fig Tree, I might be a bit twitchy with regard to what rents I can get. The mortgage stress is a little bit below the average, but it's relatively high. Anything I think over about 25%, I get worried about. So, but not as much as some. So there's probably enough data there to suggest prices are likely to go sideways or down rather than up from this point. Okay, Philip says Balkan Hills, 2153. Sure. Clear the filter. 2153. Add it in. Apply. Balkan Hills, Bella Vista, Winston Hills. Ooh, Doesn't look too good. 19,413 households, so a big area. 10,603 borrowing, so highly mortgaged. 4,874 renting. 2,903 in mortgage stress, none severe stress. So mortgage stress is 27.4, that's not too bad. Risk of default 182, 1.7%, so that's quite low. But rental stress 67.6%. And overall financial stress 31.9%. So here, rental stress looks to be a real problem. 67%, that's very high. And I suspect that that's quite a lot of the new developments that have gone up there. We're certainly seeing significant downward pressure in some of those types of areas, simply because of the fact that the investment community is now not getting the returns they need, and I think this probably supports that. Mortgage stress, they're not too bad at the moment. Laura says, great work, thank you, appreciate that. 4005. I was just thinking, it's good that the old model has not fallen over. It doesn't normally. It'd be annoying if it did. Okay, New Farm. Classified as a young affluent suburb. 9,924 households there. 2,201 borrowing. 6,755 renting. So very much a renting environment. 220 in stress, mortgage stress. That's 10%, that's very low. 64 risking default. Default rates at 2.9. And 32.8% in rental stress. So overall financial stress at 24.5. That's quite often the case. Quite often I find with young affluent groups, a lot of them are actually doing reasonably well even now, although, not as good as previously because of the COVID situation. But many of them are still doing reasonably well, unless they are in some areas where the property values have really shot through, like Bondi, for example, where you see different things. So I would say that's reasonably positive there. The rental stress is a bit below the national average. The mortgage stress is very low, so the probability would be that prices will be reasonably stable in that environment, I would suggest, for the moment. Okay, Chris says Glenfield, New Zealand dollars. Thank you very much. Appreciate that contribution. I should say that I'm going down the ones with the super chat because there are so many. I'll come back to the others as I get time. Right, Glenfield 2070. Clear the list. 2070. Apply. Come on. If I don't apply, I get the whole lot. Okay, Glenfield. Right. 4,996 households, of which 2,005 are borrowing, 1,646 are renting, 251 are in mild stress, 947 in severe stress. So that's quite a lot in severe stress. Remember, severe stress is more than a 10% deficit. Mortgage stress at 59.8%. That is really high. 95% risking over the next 12 months, 4.7% defaulting risk in the next 12 months, and 26.7% rental stress, 32.8% in financial stress. Let me highlight, this is exclusive professional. So within this group, we have the more affluent set. And this is what I'm seeing again and again and again, that more affluent households are the ones being caught out by COVID. So we're seeing significant rises in mortgage stress amongst more affluent households. Now, they quite often will have multiple mortgages, they'll have big mortgages, they've been used to bigger incomes, and now their incomes are being compressed. And as a result of that, quite often, they struggle. Okay, let's have a look. Edward. Oh, 4 at the same time. Okay, let's see what I can do. Clear the filter. I can put more than one in at the same time, but I may not be able to put 4 in. 23902. We'll add that one. 2902. 2912. And 3280. I think I can only do. I'll try 3. I think that might be pushing it to do 4 at the same time. Let's see what happens. Yeah. Let's put the other one as well then. 3860. Okay. Apply. Okay. All right. So we are firstly 2912 is the first one that came up. That's in regional ACT. 2,336 households, 861 borrowing, 1,427 renting, few in miles stress 144. That's 16.7%. Risk of default only 10, 1.2%. Rental stress and financial stress both low. So that one looks pretty good. If I go to the next one, which is 2902, this is the outer suburbs of ACT Canberra. 6052 households, 2,888 borrowing, 1,951 renting, 2,425 mild stress. That's very high. 85.7% in mortgage stress. So that's a very stressed outer suburban area of Canberra. 34 risking default next 12 months at 1.2%. Rental stress is low at 21.1. Overall financial stress 47.7. So that is a stressing postcode. And you can see that the stress resides in those with a mortgage. So I would suggest there are a lot of people there, perhaps on estates, that have actually got those mortgages. That's pretty significant. Next one on your list is 3860. 3860 is Mafra, places like that. 3,449 households, 1,296 borrowing, 1,285 renting, stress 648. That's 50% in mortgage stress. So again, that's high. 29 risking default at 2.2%. Rental stress at 16.7% and financial stress at 25.5%. So again, mortgage stress is pretty high. And the last one, which was 3280, 14,420 households in there, 4,843 who are borrowing, 6,667 renting, 807 in mortgage stress at 16.7%, 149 risking default or 3.1% over the next 12 months, and 43% of households in rental stress, so that's quite high. Overall financial stress indicator 25.5. So that's again, some worrying signs there, particularly I think on the rental side of things. I classify that as a wealthy senior, so an older type, more mature type of postcode. So there you go. Managed to do all of those for you. Okay. That's very good. Nickel88 says 4105 in Queensland, debating whether my property is a dog. So you've picked up some of my conversations with some of the real estate agents. It really is quite funny how that conversation has really taken off. A dog is a dog is a dog, to quote my guests. All right, what have we got? Okay, this is like Tennyson, places like that. Inner suburbs, multicultural establishment. 6,003 households, 2,229 borrowing, 3,034 renting, 808 in severe mild stress, none in severe stress, 35.3% in mortgage stress. So around the average, slightly below average. 54 risking default at 2.4%. Rental stress at 35.9 and financial stress at 31.6. So not as bad as some we've seen, but neither is it particularly great. I mean, anything I think I've said, anything over 25%, typically from a mortgage stress perspective, I'd worry about. But in the current environment, it's probably a bit extended. So there you go. That's the data on that one. Okay. Grit says 5007, and then somebody else has said, can you show the top mortgage stress postcodes for each state? So when we see the other postcodes, they can compare. No, I can't do that in this particular model. I'd have to create another view. Maybe next time. maybe next time. The beauty of the I use Tableau as my front end for my model, and Tableau is very flexible. So I could do all of that, but I couldn't. I'd have to code it, and I can't code it now. So another time. Anyway, let me just let me just go to 5007 first. Okay. What have we got? So this is like Brompton, Hindmarsh, Welland, West Hindmarsh. CBD Fringe in South Australia, so quite close into Adelaide. Young affluent postcode, 3,518 households, 1,051 borrowing, 2,168 renting, none in stress, so no stress at all, 25 though risking default over the next 12 months. And I should explain, default and mortgage stress is not completely linked, so there are other reasons why people sometimes default. So those default ratings are linked partly to mortgage stress, but also partly to history over the last 4 or 5 years when I've looked at the back records. So that's one of the reasons why you might get defaults without stress. But 50% are in rental stress, and overall financial stress is at 30.8. So there you go, 50%, that's quite high. So I suspect you've got quite a few younger people in rented accommodation in that particular area, and they are feeling it because of what's happened with regard to COVID and cash flow. Okay, now let's go back to Michael and say I can't do my comparator, but I can give you 2, 5, 6, 7. 2, 5, 6, 7. Apply. Okay, this is Mount Annan. This is not good. 12,338 households, of which 8,705 are borrowing, 3,256 are renting, 6,218 are in mild stress, which is 71.4%. Risking default, 114, 1.3%. Rental stress, very high, 100%, plus or minus. This is a very stressed postcode, and it's one of the ones I know that's quite close to the top of my list in New South Wales. So that's a big deal. We've seen quite a few of these types of postcodes definitely under significant pressure. Quite often we find a lot of people, again, with new properties that they've bought in at the top of the market. Their incomes are much compressed at the moment, and it's flagged as a battling urban segment too. And so you may recall from the earlier data I showed you, battling urban and disadvantaged fringe were two very large groups. So there you go. That doesn't look very promising. Prices will fall in this postcode, I would have thought, quite considerably. Okay, Picton, Major Mayhem, 2571. Two, 5, 7, 1. Apply. Okay. So this is obviously quite a large area. It includes Wilton, Razorback, etc., etc. Battling urban, inner regional Australia, 4,123 households, 2,176 borrowing, 1,024 renting, mild stress, 1,422. Mortgage stress 52.2%, so very high levels of mortgage stress. Risk of default 32 in the next 12 months, or 1.2%. 65% in rental stress. Financial stress at 50%. This is another example of a stressed area. I also have a feeling that this will be an area impacted by the bushfires, and that of course has had a significant impact on people in those areas too. So that's probably another reason. So this looks to me to be an area where prices will be under pressure for some long time yet. Charles L says 5352. Okay, this is a place like Bethany, Stonewall, Rowland Flat. Inner regional Australia, South Australia, rural family is the classification I've got for it. 2,386 households, 900 borrowing, 883 renting, 118 mild stress, so that's pretty good at 20%. Risk of default 19 or 2.1%. Rental stress 10%. Financial stress 11%. So basically, relative to some of the others we've seen tonight, this is a pretty good story. Bit of stress, bit of rental stress, but not dramatically so, is where I put it there. Okay, and then Joytech 22 says 2747 and another one. Let's do that then. Clear the list. 2747 and 2750. Okay. Apply. Okay. So this is Penrith, Emu Plains, and then we've also got Warrington, which includes Cambridge Park, Kingswood, Shanes Park. Okay, let's go for Penrith first. 18,343 households, 7,189 borrowing, 8,098 renting, 2,516 in mild mortgage stress, none in severe stress, at 35%. 86 households risking default next 12 months at 1.2%, rental stress 42.7%, and financial stress 32.6%. So, not a great story, but not as bad as some as we've seen, I would say. If we go across the other one, 15,789 households, 7,706 borrowing, 6,823 renting, mild stress of 2,324, severe stress 0, 30.2% in mortgage stress, 93 risking default at 1.2%, and in terms of rental stress 37.9, and overall financial stress 31.2. So if you compare the two, you can see that Warrington's slightly better than Penrith Emu Plains. Both of those are not as bad as some we've seen, but also a little bit iffy, I guess. And Vel has asked, oh no, he hasn't, there's no number. All right. Now, let's see what else we've got. I'm just going down the other list, and Cookie Boy's asked a question. Let me just take a break from doing the lookups for you. So Cookie's asked a really interesting. Could a higher Aussie dollar stop a V-shaped recovery? Overseas investors buying our property and imports. Yeah, it's difficult to know, isn't it? I think a V-shaped recovery is very unlikely. I've said that for quite some time. But if in fact the Aussie dollar is a lot higher, one of the big problems is you don't import inflation. Remember that the Reserve Bank is trying to lift inflation. One of the inflation levers they can use is to drop the dollar so that imports are actually, so we import inflation, right? So now, of course, oil is very low. That's another reason. So it could have an impact. I think what it might do is it might, as you say, put some potential overseas investors off in terms of looking at the, what's going on in Australia. So that might protect us a little, but the Reserve Bank, I think, will try to push the dollar lower. And interestingly, Westpac, when they were talking about negative interest rates, they did actually make the point that a lower dollar is good. And in fact, if you went negative rates, it would help the dollar to get lower, and that would be good. So, yeah, who knows? Interesting question. 2153, please. Okay, let's see what we can do. Go back to the picture-in-picture. 2153. Apply. Okay, this is Balcombe Hills, Belle Vista, Winston Hills. Have we done that one before? I'm not sure. Anyway, I'll do it again just in case. 19413 households, 10,603 borrowing, 4,874 renting, 2,903 in mild stress at 27.4%, risk of default 182 at 1.7%, rental stress 67.6%, financial stress 31.9%. So the rental side of it's more concerning than the mortgage side with those figures there. Okay. Now here's another one. 2795 says Silo. 2795. This is Raglan, right? 2795, 2795, yeah. So this is like Bathurst, Peel, Perthville, Warrable, Wattleflat. 18,041 households, 6,685 borrowing, 8,084 renting, 2,507 in mild stress, 37.5% in mortgage stress, 143 risking default over the next 12 months at 2.1%, 39% rental distress, and overall financial stress at 31.4%. So not too bad, but not somewhere in the middle. Disadvantaged Fringe is the flag that it has, which would suggest that there's quite a lot of new development on the outskirts of the city there. A lot of estates, I suspect, a lot of similar properties, and with mortgage stress at 37.7, which is exactly the average across the country. It shows you that there's a bit of issue there. Rental stress, again, a little bit high. So quite a lot of pressure. I would be surprised to see prices rising on those numbers. Okay. Now Bayeux says Box Hill, 3128. Sure thing. 3128. Apply. Oh no. I forgot to do that again. 3128. If I don't do that, I get everything, and then it's rather hard to read. Box Hill South. Box Hill South. Houston, Wattle Park. Victoria, outer suburban mainstream. 8,726 households. 2,553 borrowing. 4,913 renting. Mild stress 393. Mortgage stress at 15.4%. 76 risking default at 3%. 25.4% rental stress. Financial stress 18.8%. Pretty clean bill of health relative to the other ones we've seen tonight, I would say. Now, Michael Haynes says, can I look at Moomba? 2731. Sure. There you go. Inner regional Australia. Rural family, 3,044, 1,002 borrowing, 1,270 renting, none in stress, 18 risking default over the next 12 months at 1.8%, 37.5% in rental stress and 15.6% in financial stress. So relatively speaking, a relatively benign environment there, I would suggest to you. Bell says 2145. Okay, let's give that a go then. Come on. Okay, so this is Constitution Hill, Greystanes, Wentworthville, South Wentworthville, Westmead. Okay. Right. 27,856, so quite a large geographic area with lots of households. 10,907, 10,997 borrowing. 13,021 renting. 1,764 in mild stress, 196 in severe stress, 17.8% in mortgage stress. So that's not too bad. 168 risking default in the next 12 months, 1.5%. But rental stress, 62.8%. Financial stress, 36.4%. So that tells me that we have this same situation where you have a lot of people in rented accommodation there who are struggling to make those rental repayments. So that's going to put downward pressure on property investors and on property investments there. I suspect that will include some relatively newly constructed stuff, and that's another reason why I believe that property investments may not look too good ahead. But those borrowing for owner-occupied purposes, the mortgage stress is quite low. Rod says, can I do an analysis on suburbs that surround the major airports? Well, I could if you give me some postcodes. I'd have to reverse engineer it. I can't do that sort of live. But if that's something that you're interested in, send me an email via the DFA blog and I'll see whether I can build something for you. I'm sure many of us would like a breakdown on a standout suburb on your charts. 3977, says Agent Smith. Okay, let's try that one. 3977. Add it. Apply it. Okay, Cannons Creek, Cranbourne. Yeah. Okay, so 32,464. So the first thing to know about Cranbourne is it's an area of massive development, lots and lots and lots of building, a lot of it new building. 21,902 are borrowing, so more than half are actually borrowing, and 10,422 are renting, 5,502 in stress, 204 in severe stress, so 26.1%. Risk of default over the next 12 months, 745 or 3.4%. So we've got quite a quantum there. And the rental stress is very high at 65.8%. And so overall financial stress is 38.7. So this was a postcode that I would suggest is going to definitely struggle for the next 12 to 18 months. Prices, I think, will slide because on both sides of the equation, both investment properties and owner-occupied properties have some difficulty. But actually at the moment, interestingly, mortgage stress is at 26.1, so that's a bit lower. But because it's a big number, it still could have quite an impact on the situation. And there's always a big debate. You know, do I show it as a percentage or do I show it as a total number? Cranbourne is there because of the big developments that have been there, and therefore the high number of postcodes. Sorry, high number of households in the postcode. There you go. YouTube Junkie says 4112. Edit the filter. Clear this list. 4112 and apply. Okay. This is Kirby in Queensland. 4112. Urban Fringe. No? Yes, Urban Fringe, suburban mainstream. 2572 households. 1,313 borrowing. 849 renting. Mild stress 263. 20% mortgage stress 29. Risking default at 2.2. Rental stress 75%, so that's a bit high. And overall financial stress 35. So the observation there is that of those renting, quite a few of them are having difficulties. That could actually put downward pressure on the rental sector there and could impact those who are investing. On the owner-occupied side, looks relatively clean relative to some of the others. Okay, Angie asked about 3995. 3995. I know. I should probably know all these postcards off by heart by now, but I don't. There are too many of them. Okay. This is Cape Patterson, Arches Creek, South Dudley, amongst others. Inner regional Victoria, wealthy seniors, 5,793 households, of which 1,483 are borrowing, 2,928 are renting, 124 in mild stress, none in severe stress, mortgage stress at 8.4, so very low. Risk of default 53 or 3.6%, so it's a bit higher. Rental stress at 45.7, so it's a bit above average. And financial stress 25.3, a bit below average. So relatively speaking, not too bad, but a few early warning signs there, particularly on the rental side of the house. And that might mean that investment properties will be under pressure. The owner-occupied side of the equation looks pretty good. People are servicing their mortgages relatively well, so that will put a bit of a floor on prices. Okay. Bundy 2065 has asked for 3. Reset. Oops, clear the list. All right, let's try and put those in. 2065. 2066. 2138. Can't do it like that. Try that. I need a neural connection to my computer, so I don't need to type. Would be quite useful, I think, sometimes. Just wouldn't want to get distracted at any time. Okay, apply. Okay, Lane Cove, first one. Exclusive professionals. 13,466 households, 5,313 borrowing, 6,014 renting, 802 in mild stress, 1,326 in severe stress, giving a mortgage stress rating of 40.1. Now, this is typical again. I think I've said this before. Often exclusive professionals are finding the going tough, and this is a good example. Risk of default, 222 at 4.2%. So again, very significant issues here, I think. And rental stress, 43.5. Overall financial stress, 35.3. So that's a good classic example of an upper suburban area, exclusive professional, but where the financial pressures are really biting. I'm seeing that quite a lot. Next one is Crow's Nest, so just a bit over, 14,878, of which 4,352 are borrowing, 8,452 are renting. Mild stress, 670. Severe stress, 949, 37.2, so not quite as bad, but still significant. 164 risk default next 12 months at 3.8%, and 44% in rental stress, and 35.9 in financial stress. So another example of a sector where exclusive professionals, top end of the market, but under financial pressure at the moment. And then the other one is Concord West, Liberty Grove Roads, outer suburbs, 8,268 households, 2,941 borrowing, 4,597 renting, 511 in mild stress, 483 in severe stress, 33.8, so that's a bit lower. 71 risking default next 12 months, or 2.4%. 50 dead actually in terms of rental stress, and 39.8% in terms of financial stress. So what's interesting that you start to see the reasons why some of these postcodes may not actually be seeing values rising in the next little while. Investment side of things perhaps under pressure, households under pressure too. So they've done reasonably well up till now, but reasons perhaps to think they might slide from this point a little bit perhaps. And Aaron says 6155. Let's do that. Okay, apply. It's Canning Vale in the outer suburbs of Western Australia. 17,134 households, of which 10,018 are borrowing, 4,453 are renting, mild stress 4,165 at 41.6%, so that's very high relative to the average. 403 risking default at 4%, so again that's high. Rental stress is lower at 30.3 and 30.2. And again, this is, I think, another example of a relatively modern area, a lot of building, probably close in together, a lot with mortgages, and now a lot under financial pressure. Of course, a lot of people, if you look at some of these areas, ended up with mortgages that were very large because their incomes were above average at the time, but then incomes got compressed, so that's another reason. So I'd be a bit worried. I would expect prices to fall further in Canning Vale ahead. All right, let's have a look. See what else we've got. Whoa, 2305 says Surin. Try that one. 2305. Okay. Oh, come on. 2305 plus. That's better. Apply. Okay. That's New Lambton in rural New South Wales. Includes Lambton Heights. 5,358 households. 2,280 borrowing. 1,923 renting. 1,484 in stress. Mild stress. 65%. So that's a very stressed area. Disadvantage Fringe again. We've seen that sort of profile before. 54 risking default next 12 months at 2.4%. Rental stress at 21.4, 35.4%. So you can see again the whole issue of mortgage stress and how it actually is impacting some of these areas, I'm afraid. And Aaron has come back and said 6149 as well, please. Sure thing. 6149. Okay. Apply. Okay. This is Bull Creek and Leeming. 7,121. Western Australia, mature staple suburbs. 3,073 borrowing, 1,946 renting, 1,289 stress, 187 in severe stress at 48%, so another high one. 132 risking default, 4.3%. 28.6% in rental stress, 28.5% in financial stress. So again, same scenario, high amounts of mortgage stress, high amounts of borrowing. Agent Smith has asked, a dog is a dog is a dog. Can you define what it is you look out for? When is a bargain really a dog? Yeah. So, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, partly, right? Because some people love a property, some hate it. But you can actually say where a property is. Is it south facing, north south facing? Is it getting sun? Does it not get sun? For example, is it on a major road? Is it not a major road? Is it close to amenities? Those sorts of things, right? They're hard to change. And whilst you can renovate a property and make it, nicer inside, if the sub context for it is that it's always going to face south, it's always going to be on a busy road, it's always going to be away from amenities, it's a dog. It'll always be a dog. You can't do anything about it. And yet, people are often forced to buy dogs because they can't afford to buy a better property in a better location. And some people say it's better to buy the worst property in the best street rather than the other way around, and maybe that's true, but it depends a little bit on where you're looking, what you're doing. So Veronica said in her post with me, be careful, because quite often a dog is a dog is a dog. It will stay a dog. Whatever you do to it, it'll still be a dog. It will still not perform as well as another property in a better location with better amenities. So it's very important to be really cautious and careful about what you choose to buy. So that's what she's saying. I think she's right. Okay, let's see. Okay, 3031. Sure. I'm trying to do them as quickly as I can now because I'm running 9:39. I've run over time. I do apologise if people were looking to go. Was it 3019? 3031. Clearly, I'm not going to get through all of them tonight. I've got a whole load that I took from earlier. Just to say, those who wrote in earlier, I will do a separate post. I've got quite a few quick Q&As to do. I'll do a separate Q&A and put them up so that you won't miss out just because we had such a busy time tonight. 3031, Kensington Gardens, 8,947 households, 2,549 borrowing, 5,873 renting, 282 in stress, mild, 15%, that's pretty good, 64 risking default at 2.5%, but 49.2% in rental stress and overall financial stress, 36.5%. So this is a rental issue, so quite a few people are going to be struggling here with their rents, and that's probably a cash flow issue. Yeah, Maria says, I can't stand a house without natural sunlight. Yeah, I agree. My wife is exactly the same as that. That was the first thing we went to when we looked at a house. The point there is that it's worth checking that because it's hard to change the direction of the sun, right? 4304, somebody's asked for. 4304. Clear list. 4304. Okay. Okay, apply. Okay. Silkstone in the urban fringe, Queensland, including Ebervale. Sounds very Welsh. 7470 households, 2,480 borrowing, 3,979 renting, mild stress 1,286, Mortgage stress 51.9, so mortgage stress very high there. Anything above 50 I'm very worried about. 47 risking default at 1.9%, and rental stress very high too. So pressures I would suggest in that area. I would expect to see property prices sliding, and we're going to see probably higher levels of default over the medium term. There you go. So if you're going to be buying, be cautious. Make sure that you're not overpaying, because I think prices will probably be sliding rather than rising from this point forward. Parliament House is a kennel. Very good. Okay, 4551 from One Burjo. Hang on, let's do that one. 4551. Apply. Okay. Little Mountain. Calundra, around there. 26,665 households. 8,496 borrowing. 12,241 renting. So a lot of renting going on there. 2,655 mild stress, none in severe stress, 31.3% mortgage stress. So a bit below the average, but still quite high. Defaults at 225 over the next 12 months at 2.6%. Rental stress at 35.5%. And overall financial stress 26.3%. So lower than some, but the rental stress, around average. Mortgage stress a little bit below average is how I'd read that. So that would suggest to me that prices probably won't be taking a deep dive, but they might not be going very far the other way either. Okay, 451. Done that one. Police the dogs or police dogs? Yeah, very good. Okay, Blacktown says sunnier, I think it is. 2148. Okay. $2148 is Blacktown, including Prospect, Marion, 22,056, of which 9,054 borrowing, 10,092 are renting, 3,571 are in mild stress, nothing in severe stress, 39.4, so a bit above average, 147 risking default next 12 months at 1.6%, but 76%, 76.5% in fact, are in rental stress, and therefore overall financial stress above 50%. This is a postcode that's definitely in difficulty, and I would suggest that the rental sector is leading it down. Property investors are going to have a torrid time there, and as a result of that, that's going to put more pressure on the overall market. So I expect prices to fall. Okay. Done Blacktown. Banks will increase loan term to 50 years. Probably, Stefan. Yeah, I'm expecting all sorts of silly things like that to happen. Anything to keep the debt bomb just going a bit further. George said, great show tonight. I like to have slept through it all, but I've been living through every painful postcode now. This very good. Yeah, I know it gets a bit mesmeric, but actually it's quite. This comparative stuff's really quite interesting. I think. All right, now I'm running out of time. I'm going to do just a couple more, and then I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop because I'm just running out of smoke. 2167. We'll do that one. 2167. 2167. Okay. Apply. Okay. This is Glenfield, Urban Fringe. 3,201 households, of which 1,671 are borrowing, 1,264 renting, mild stress 983, none in severe stress, but 58.8%, so high levels of mortgage stress. 21 risking default at 1.3% over the next 12 months. Rental stress 87.5%, and overall financial stress 65.1%. So this is a troubled postcode on both sides of the house. Mortgage stress is high, rental stress is high. Expect prices to fall further in this particular area. Expect there to be difficulties with regard to investment properties, and expect forced sales ahead, I would suggest. 2167. 2216 Rockdale, Brighton. Okay. Whoops, done that. Yep, Banksia, Brighton, Les Sands, Rockdale. Flagged as a young affluent. I know that there's other groups in around that area there. 11,397, of which 3,490 are borrowing, 6,051 are renting, so a lot of renting going on. 6,603 in stress, 17.2. That's relatively low. 69 risking default in the next 12 months, 2%, but 64.6% renting is stress. And overall financial stress, 39.6. So the renting side of the equation, so property investment in that area is looking probably a bit sick at the minute. Many people will be struggling. There's been quite a lot of new building, of course, as well. I think that's part of the story. Property investment, weak. Therefore, overall property price is probably down in that area. Okay. Thank you. Somebody's just said we can't see your model. That's because I did that. My apologies. Anyway, I've given you all the answers, but thank you. Can you do P&P again? Yes, I can. Thank you, Mazim. Good spot. I am getting tired, I think, is the truth. This is probably why I'm starting to make mistakes. So I'm just going to do a last couple and then I'm going to stop. 3082 and 3085 and 3087 and apply. Okay, so we're looking here at 3085 McLeod Yalambi, 5,552 households, of which 2,435 are borrowing, 1,954 renting, 1,739 are in rental stress. That's 71.4%. It's a high degree of mortgage stress. High degree of mortgage stress in that postcode. 48 risking default next 12 months or 2%. And over in the rental side, 34.8% in rental stress. Overall financial stress, 43%. So you can see it's quite high. That looks like a suburb where prices will fall over the next 12 to 18 months. Mill Park, urban fringe, disadvantaged fringe. So these are all disadvantaged fringe areas. 10,578 households. They're borrowing 5,048. Renting 3,193, mild stress 2,923 or 57.9%, so not quite as high as the previous one but very high. 93 risking default the next 12 months at 1.8%, 68% in rental stress, 48% in financial stress. Another stressed area, prices will fall, I fear, in that area too. And the third one is Watsonia, again disadvantaged fringe on the outskirts of the suburban fringe, 3,724, of which 1,647 are borrowing, 1,173 are renting, and mild stress 878 at 53.3%, 31 risking default next 12 months or 1.9%, but the rental story is different there at 10%, and overall financial stress at 26.7. So of the three, that one is not as badly positioned as the other two. But when you look at mortgage stress and when you look at rental stress, there are some significant issues there. Right. Now, family law says 2, 2, 2, 3. Okay, let's do that one. 2, 2, 2, 3. Apply. Okay. All right. Mortdale, Oatley, in outer suburbs, 8,174 households, of which 3,124 borrowing, 3,059 are renting, mild stress 120, severe stress 227, 11.1, so very low levels of mortgage stress, 61 risking default at 2%, a rental stress higher at 63%, overall financial stress 27.8. So the rental sector, definitely a question mark there. A lot of people in rental stress. That will put some downward pressure on the rental sector. The rest of it looks a little bit sort of easier to deal with, I think. Okay, Glenswood Hills at 2557. This is going to be my last one, I fear. And then we're just going to run through the last 2 or 3 minutes of the presentation. 2557. Okay. Apply. Okay. This is Catherine Field, Rosemore. 2,809 households, of which 1,673 are borrowing, 924 are renting, and 209 are in stress at 12.5, 23 risking default at 1.4, 77.8% are in rental stress with financial stress at 33%. So probably a modern area, I would suggest, quite highly leveraged. The rental end of it looks to be the one that's more wobbly, and that will have a downward pressure, but not necessarily significant. Okay. So, okay, now let's then just go back to the final few slides, and then I'll tell you what you can do if you want to get some information a different way, because clearly there's a lot of interest in this. Okay, so on the DFA blog, I'll put up all the information about the mortgage stress and the tables and things. That'll go up in the next few days, and all the maps. So if you want to sign up for the DFA blog, go over there. You can get all of my posts. You can support our work. So one way is via Patreon. You have different tiers, and you can get access. In fact, one of the tiers gives you full access to all of the mortgage stress reports every month. So you might want to look at that if you want to get hold of all the sets of information, or you can go into a we don't make any money from this. This is all about just covering the costs. So Patreon's quite a good way of supporting. If you want to make a one-off donation, you can do via PayPal. That also helps just to keep the running costs running, or even Bitcoin. We can do that. There's also DFA merch as well, using this particular design, which is the one I came up with, which is the Today logo. A few people have got that. You can go to Teesprings, there's there, or you can go off directly from the website on the YouTube, and you'll see the merch up there as well. Top hits, just to say, Let Them Eat Bricks was one I did the other day on the incentive schemes. Very popular post. There was a post that I did with Tarek Brooker on the eye of the storm and heading over the cliff. Very popular post, that one too. Over on the other channel, Interest of the People, John Adams and I did one called The Economic Paradox That Will Change Your Life Forever. We set a test there. We described a particular economic scenario and then asked people to explain what it might be. And we'll come back to that, and that's been quite popular. Chris Bates' latest post, mortgage broker, financial advisor, very popular. Ladies from the property market frontline, we touched on dogs there. And also, I just want to highlight the interview I did with Senator Gerard Rennick, who's a Labour senator from Queensland, and he was actually arguing for quite a lot of the things that I was arguing for in terms of improvement to the investment strategy for Australia. So if you've not watched that post, I recommend it. It's actually quite useful. Okay, our next show, scheduled at the moment for 16th of June, 2 weeks' time, on Tuesday. That will be the day that the Reserve Bank releases, I think that's the right date, releases the next minutes. 14th, 15th, yeah, it will be 16th of June. There may be one next week if I can get a guest. I'm working on a couple of guests. Watch out for that. And just now to say that for those people who sent in the request beforehand via the DFA blog, I will do a separate post and I'll answer all of those. Those who didn't get an answer tonight on the DFA blog, if you would like to send me a request via the DFA blog directly, I will try and answer your question with regard to the mortgage stress over the next few days. We might also see whether we can find a way of making the tool more accessible online for people who should be interested in the access to it. So my question, I guess, is, was this useful? Would you like to go through a similar exercise again and, spend more time looking at mortgage stress, or do you think we've done it to death now? I have tried to give you as much information as I can. I should also say that for those people in mortgage stress, and I will say this, it's very important that if you are in financial mortgage stress, take action early. Don't just automatically assume that you're going to shake it out, particularly now. Don't assume that just by refinancing it will solve the problem. Drop a cash flow, figure out what the money is coming in, what the money is going out. Only half the households I survey have any sense of it, so most people don't have a cash flow. Then start prioritising. First point. Second point, if you are in financial difficulty, talk to your lender, particularly now. They are helping, they are willing to help. And it's very important to engage with them early rather than just hoping things will go away. And thirdly, don't assume that just by restructuring the loan or consolidating debts, it automatically will solve the problem. Unless you change your behaviour, unfortunately, mortgage stress and financial stress more generally can live with you for quite a long time. Remember what I said about Mandra? It can take 2 or 3 years for this to work through to essentially create significant pressures. So, be cautious, be careful. Don't overcommit. It's my final message. I see so many people commit on the assumption that their incomes will grow, and then it doesn't grow, and then they get into difficulty. Okay, so I hope you found that useful. I had fun, believe it or not. Thank you very much for spending the time on the channel today. We got peak concurrent of only a mere 516 tonight. No, actually wrong. 955. 955 was the peak. Not quite 1,000, but not far off. So great. Thank you for that. Appreciate your time. We will be back definitely in 2 weeks' time, when we will actually provide you with an update on our scenarios again, and also the discussion from the Reserve Bank. There may well be a live stream, a special next week, if I can find a live guest who is interested in coming on and having a chat. But I want to say thank you very much for spending time with me tonight. Cookie says you should do it every 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah, well, the data is moving quite quickly. Master Singleton says, I love the format. Thank you for all your information and insight. That's great. George says, I don't know what I said. Make sure to leave a like on your way out, says Plexus. Absolutely. Please like, share. This will be going up as a replayable stream, including all the questions. What I will do is I will just go through and look at the early part of the chat, because I unfortunately missed some of the postcodes early on, and I'll try and incorporate some of those into the Q&A show that I record offline, and then put it up so that people don't feel left out. And, I say again, if you missed out this time, feel free to send me an email at the DFA blog with a particular postcode, or, check back next time. I will have the stress data available every time now on the live stream, so we can always do a bit there. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed tonight. Thank you for spending so much time. It's now 10 o'clock. I think it's the longest DFA blog video post ever. So anyway, thank you for that. Take care, keep safe, keep well. I hope your finances are bearing up under the strain. And I look forward to seeing you next time for another hopefully exciting, useful, and hopefully informative session. This is Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, signing off and just saying thank you to Plexus for moderating. Thank you for Cookie Boy for all his help. And thanks to everybody who's been on tonight. It's been really good, and we'll see you again next time.